Hi, Nick.
Hi, Jeremy.
How you doing today?
How you doing? Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. The weather has finally started cooling down over here.
Yep, same over here in Chicago. I mean, this it's been a really nice day out today. So, not
Yeah,
compared to what it has been for like the last 2 days. So it's good to finally have the windows open again.
I know, and at least with the amount of heat that we got, my yard should finally be dry enough for me to mow tomorrow.
Right. Oh, that's good. Good.
Yeah. Well, what do you say? I don't want to waste any time. I want to get this next guy on here. We've been looking
Yeah,
forward to
this
this
is
episode. Yeah. So what do
so
you
am I. I
say
mean,
we
I
bring
feel
him
like this
on?
is going to be a really good one.
Yes.
Bring them
Okay,
on.
ladies and gentlemen, please welcome. He is the vice president of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, otherwise known as ICER, Mr. Gary Heseltine.
Thank you for
Hi,
inviting
Gary.
me onto your show. Hi, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. It is
I'm
an
good.
honor to have you on this show.
The pleasure's
It
all
really
mine.
is.
Um, we have been really looking forward to having you on the show. I first I first found out about you from the documentary that just came out recently, UFO Conspiracies,
Okay.
and I thought it was very well done, very well done. I don't know if Nick has had the opportunity to see it, but I've seen it a few times, and it does raise up a few questions. So,
It certainly does.
yeah, but
Ask
before
anything
we
you want.
get into that, huh? What was that, Gary?
I just said ask anything you want. If I can answer you, I will.
Well, first thing I want to find out is how did you get into researching UFOs? Did you have an experience with one?
I had a childhood experience when I was 16. I didn't see a spaceship or an alien, but what I saw was an object with my then girlfriend that seemingly triggered a number of power outages, as you would say in the States. The whole area plunged into darkness, and I moved from a second geographical position from where I'd first seen the light, the bright white light, no distinct shape. I then moved using my bicycle uh, approximately a mile to my home. And when I was at my home, the object passed over my house, and I was in the garden looking up at the light. And I don't know why, but I put my arm up like I'm answering a question in class. And as soon as the light went past my arm, the entire area was plunged into darkness. Well, that was crazy because how can I predict a power cut? So I realized that that light, whatever it was, must have interacted with the power grid. It's impossible for me to predict a power cut. So that's where my interest began as a 16-year-old.
Wow, and it led you all the way up to
Oh,
the
wow.
position you're in right now. That's
Uh,
that's amazing.
well, for a long
Yeah, it
time,
really
I actually
is.
did nothing. For a long time, I did nothing. It wasn't really until about 20 years later that by chance I came across a glossy magazine where I was working as a police detective. I went into a shop and there was this glossy magazine called UFO Magazine. And I looked at it. I thought, wow, I've never seen a UFO magazine in this major kind of newsagent store. And that reawakened my interest. And cutting a long story short, over a couple of years, I caught up on the subject that I'd been away from for a long time. I read all the new
Mhm.
books that were out, and I gradually felt as if I was being pulled in, and that's when I decided to get involved in active research.
Wow. um, and
Wow.
And it's curious that you would bring up the UFO magazine because I was going to ask you about that because on the documentary it said that you were the owner of it.
Well, that's a different
Um,
magazine from the one that I saw all those years ago. I run in 2013. I retired from the police after 24 years. The last 19 years of which I'd been a detective, and I retired purposely early to launch my own online magazine called UFO Truth Magazine,
okay.
and that's now been running 9 years. So we're going well. Just about to launch issue 55.
Nice. So is it digital
Oh,
only or is it
wow.
physical copies of it?
Yeah, yeah. As much as I would have liked to have had it in print, when I tried to go down that line, the costs were simply too prohibitive. The print costs, so I launched it as an e-zine. It's bi-monthly, 96. So every 2 months, 96 pages, and it's direct to your email. The website's out there, and I can give you the link. And what I can say to your guests is, if anybody wants a free copy as a taster, then fine. All they have to do is mention your show and email me at heseltinegary@hotmail.com, and I'll send them a free copy for them to look at.
Awesome. And if you give us a link, we will definitely put it down in the chat for our show so that everybody can click on it and check it out.
Well, if you just type in www.ufotruthmagazine.co.uk, there you have it.
UFO Truth.
ufotruthmagazine.co.uk.
Okay.
Here, I'm gonna save that link. What was it one more time, Gary?
UFO Truth Magazine, written as one word, .co.uk.
Okay. I got that
Got
sent
it.
out for everybody to click on it. So hopefully I typed it out right.
Okay.
Because I've been known to mess up a couple times.
Yeah, no,
All right.
that's the wrong. That's the one.
Awesome. That's outstanding. And how well has it been doing?
It's. I have a consistent, loyal audience. It goes all around the world. It has a lot of readers in the United States, but many countries of the world. Because the beauty of it is that all you have to do is have an email address. It's not in print, so you can. There's no overheads, so it's a small subscription cost, and basically it comes out every 2 months, and it's sent direct to your email. So I have a lot of American readers.
Awesome. Because I'm pretty sure we're going to have quite a few people who are watching the show that would like to check it out.
Well, like I
Uh,
say, if they email me, quote your show, then I'll send them a free copy. Can't go any fairer than that.
there you go. If you want a free copy, email them. That's the best way to do it. Contact him directly.
Yeah,
So,
my email is Heseltine Gary, just my name in reverse, lowercase, at hotmail.com. Can't be easy.
and I have to admit, I am surprised that Hotmail is still around.
Yeah, I'm
I've
surprised
been using
too.
it a long time. I've never had an issue with it. So
Yeah,
I'm a creature of habit. If it works, I'll keep using it.
I'm the same way. I am the same way. Okay. So one thing that I definitely want to a question that I want to ask you about, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this right. Let me know if I didn't. Is the Rendlesham Forest?
Forest incident. Yeah.
Yeah. So from what I've seen, that it is basically like the UK equivalent of our Roswell, right?
It's often been likened to that. Obviously, Roswell, July 1947, is the seminal case, along with the Kenneth Arnold sighting from June of 47. They're the two sightings that really kick off the modern era that we think of. But the Rendlesham Forest is arguably regarded now as one of the top two or three cases in history. And the reason why it's a little bit different is it's not just a sighting, it's a number of sightings. And one of the things that is not really clear on Rendlesham, I think, to many people, is the number of different incidents when objects were seen. If you virtually see every documentary ever made about Rendlesham Forest, they'll talk about the Holt Memorandum, which is obviously a very important document, which relates to 2 nights of activity. But in reality, we now know that there's at least 3 nights, and there may be a 4, and there may be precursor events in that tiny few days of the December 1980, post-Christmas Day. But if you actually break down a lot of the events, they're different sightings, but happening on the same night. And so what I have accumulated over the last almost 5 years of a reinvestigation of Rendlesham that I've been doing, perhaps 15 to 18 different incidents where different objects are seen over those few days. And, a lot of people will say, why Suffolk and things like that? Ultimately, we don't know. But one of the hypotheses that I favour is that it's linked to nuclear weapons. The RAF Bentwaters was a nuclear weapons tactical storage, had a weapons storage area. Now, I know quite a lot about weapons storage areas because I worked on 2 of them when I was in the Royal Air Force as a police officer. I worked on 2 tactical nuclear weapons storage areas that are pretty much the same as the way they were for the United States Air Force that dealt with them. And so there are things that I know about the subject that others wouldn't because they hadn't worked in the environment. But I did it pretty much exactly the same as what the people did in the Rendlesham Forest incident. So obviously, when I've talked to witnesses, I've got a pretty good rapport with them because I can understand, because I pretty much did the same job. And when you know the nature of what's occurred, and then, as I said, during my reinvestigation, I've talked to new witnesses that have yet to come forward, but will do so in due course. There's a lot more to this case than the story that is portrayed in virtually every documentary ever made. There's a lot more to come.
Wow. There were some comments
Wow.
about
Yeah, I just
maybe.
brought this up.
Yeah.
Wayne Scene says my film crew spent the night there in September last year. We witnessed 6 separate UAPs in the space of half an hour, followed by 2 military jets from Lakenheath. I guess that's how you say it.
Yeah, RAF
Uh,
Lake and Heath. Yeah, I can attest
okay.
to the fact that during the course of filming for a documentary that I've been involved in, Capel Green, that's now gone back to 2017, and it's still in post production because there's that much to it, and we've done over 60 interviews with people, lots of recreations of the events in a way that has never been seen before, a lot of aerial footage in a way that's never been portrayed before, lots to it. Suffice to say that there are, it's a very strange place even to this day, and I won't give too much away, but suffice to say that I readily accept that people are still having strange experiences in the forest even today.
Okay. Jill had brought up a good point here that they always seem to be
Yeah.
happening near military institutions. Um, would that be consistent, or is that just how it seems in your opinion?
Well, no, if you look at the UFO subject historically, going back 70 plus years, there is a huge correlation between anything nuclear, whether it be a power plant or nuclear powered ships or nuclear weapon storage areas, nuclear bomb dumps, as it were. Then there is a huge correlation all over the world. And Rendlesham, that's why I think Rendlesham, the key to Rendlesham is ultimately tactical nuclear weapons. And the reason why I say that even further is that most people don't realize what was the historical context, the political circumstances that were at the time of deciding December 1918, there were two major things happening in the world. The first was the rise of the Polish shipyard workers in a city called Gdansk, led by Lech Wałęsa, the shipyard worker, who then went on to become its political leader, prime minister. And also in the Middle East, there was the 52 Iranian hostages. So that was the Iranian hostage crisis. Obviously, US citizens being held by the Iranians. So you had a powder keg potentially in the Middle East, and you also had the potential Third World War of Soviet aggression. Yes, it was still the Soviet era, and basically there were hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops massing on the border of Poland, and because Poland was formerly, well, was then still part of the Soviet system, then it was anticipated that the Soviets would go in to quell the uprising. So that was the political backdrop of December 1980. And the reason why I think it links to nuclear weapons is because I was told by Colonel Hall, who I had a 7-year collaboration with, writing a potential film script about Rendlesham Forest, that he told me on 2 occasions that there were more nuclear weapons at Bentwaters than anywhere else. One, he said, the initial time he said in Britain, and then he said Europe. Now, if that was true, that broke the armament agreements, because the weapons were not supposed to be there in the numbers that there were. They were supposed to have nuclear weapons. It was a nuclear authorized base. However, it's about the number of the nuclear weapons that were stored at Bentwaters, I think, ultimately, that is the key to Rendlesham and why UFOs turned up. So I think that at a time of nuclear crisis, it was effectively a weapons check of what you had. And I think those weapons potentially could destabilize the events in Russia and in the Middle East. So I think that's what it's about.
Okay.
But I can't prove it.
I finally just got done sharing the show everywhere that I could all this time.
Okay.
I hit all the UFO groups that I'm in, so I'm hoping that some of them guys will come in.
Okay.
So I don't have it on this list here, but something that you talked about, that you brought up about the nuclear weapons and everything, and it jogged the memory. And I don't remember where I saw this, but there was a show that I watched a long time ago. They had a theory that there was a war here on this planet years and years and years and years ago, thousands of years ago, from between that they think that it was from one alien race and another alien race, and that they had some sort of a battle here on this planet for whatever reason. I forget why they came up with this theory or how they came up with this theory. But does it sound like anything that you've heard before?
No. And if I did hear that, then I would take it with a big pinch of salt, because you've got to understand my background. I was in the Royal Air Force Police for 6 years, and then in the British Transport Police for 24 years. So effectively 30 years of policing. I can only look at the UFO subject through what I would say evidentialized. My experience of getting a case to court, to the highest level of court. In England, it would be, or in the UK, it would be classed as the Crown Court, the higher court. And I worked on all manner of inquiries, including murder, manslaughter, and rape. I was an advanced interviewer of suspects and witnesses. I was involved in the London terrorist bombings as a specialist interviewer of first responding transport police officers to 4 crime scenes, trying to retrieve their memories and plot where bodies were, potential terrorists, etc. So I always look for what I would call the best evidence, which is generally the rule of law. You look for the best evidence. And I see no evidence for these kind of stories of an intergalactic battle. Where's the evidence? In reality, there is none. It's just stories. So I look for evidence. So that's where I come from on this subject, across the board.
That's how we are. We are.
So we have a.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is that that's
go ahead,
what
Jeremy. Go ahead.
evidence as well. And hearing theories like that, it sounds unbelievable, but I've always been of the frame of mind that anything can be possible. Um, but at the same
I
time,
don't rule things out. But I don't rule things out. But what I'm saying is, there's one thing being open to an idea that's
Mhm.
been put forward, but then you have to say, well, is there any evidence to really substantiate that theory? And if there
Right.
is, great. But if there isn't, you call it out as it is. If there's no evidence, there's no evidence. And I don't think there's any evidence to prove that there's an intergalactic battle in the past over Ellison Forest. So, not for me.
Yeah, I wish I could find that show
Okay.
that had that theory out there, but I just can't remember. I just remember seeing it years ago. Um,
Well,
what was you going
I've
to
been
ask?
following the Rendlesham for a long time, and I've not heard it.
Yeah. Nick, what were you going to ask?
So what I was, well, no, I was just going to, because we got a couple of questions here in the chat room. So Jill was asking about what is your take on them using dimensional portals, windows, doorways, one not, so they're seen and can disappear just as instantly.
A few years ago, I think I would have been very skeptical, but I think the more I've delved into research into the UFO phenomenon, then I would say, while I can't prove it, I'm open to the idea that there could well be some kind of portals that open up, because there are simply too many cases where strange things happen in certain places, and it's as if these places are chosen for some reason, and it seems more than coincidence. So whilst I can't prove it, I'm now open, many years of experience, to say it's possible.
I think I
She
know
also
what
says
one
there's
she's talking about because I was just looking that up myself. Um, it's known as Stargate of the Gods, and I think it's Amaru Maru, somewhere in South America. If I even said that right, I got it written down here. Um,
what is what is it called, Jeremy?
um,
Say again.
Aramu Maru,
Right.
A A
Okay,
R.
I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah, that's what
What
I
was
got
that?
written down here. I got several different locations written down here, but that's the one that I remember looking up. It's ARAMU
But
but I
Okay.
think that's the
my
one with
argument to that is, where, but the argument would be, show me the evidence. Where is the evidence to support this theory?
that is a good question. Um, but
No, it's a
It's
very
that's
good
what
question.
seems when you ask
it's
that
not a good
question.
question. It's the obvious question. You have to have evidence. You have to have corroboration where possible. You have to have something tangible. And if somebody is going to make that kind of claim, there has to be some pretty good evidence to support it. And as far as I can see, there is none. But it makes for a good story.
That it does.
That is
um,
true. Yeah.
okay, there is a definite
So
connection. What do you think they want to see? Do you think they want to see how far our knowledge is with using nuclear technology for not only weaponizing but even travel?
Kind of a complicated question, but do I think that there's a correlation where there is evidence to say that UFOs are interested in nuclear weapons and nuclear propulsion systems? Then there are cases all over the world that would suggest that they're interested in the nuclear factor. The difference being is, okay, there's a correlation and there's corroboration from lots of different accounts that would genuinely prove a correlation. I'm happy to say that. But the question is, do we know why there is a correlation, or what does it mean? I think the ultimate answer is we don't know for certain. How I interpret it, but it's only my interpretation, but I think a lot of other researchers think the same, is that it's as if they are monitoring our use of nuclear weapons, and it's almost like they are saying you are playing with fire and you should get rid of them. And I think the reason for that may be twofold. It's only a theory, but my theory is that one, they have got bases in our deepest ocean trenches, and they're often seen coming in and out of water, large bodies of water. A lot of people don't realize that we know more about the surface of Moon and Mars than we do about our oceans. We only know about 5 to 6% of our ocean. That
Mhm.
means 94% we don't know. Now, in our deepest ocean trenches,
That's
they
right.
could well have bases. So it may well be that they've been here a long time and they just coexist and they don't really have anything to do with us and whatever. But if that was the case, then it would be their planet as well, their habitat. So if we go into a nuclear war, a third world war scenario, nuclear Armageddon, and we render the planet inhospitable, then in theory, we're destroying their habitat as well, i.e., the oceans, polluting the oceans. So that's maybe why I think that they're interested in nuclear weapons, because first and foremost, they have bases here and they don't want to see those destroyed for obvious reasons. That would make sense to me.
Now, Wayne actually had a similar question like that. I mean, something similar involving it. He asked, "Isn't it believed that they're absorbing some of the radiation from the nuclear weapons to power their own craft?"
Again, it's a theory, but I've never seen an alien craft. Have you? Um, so we don't know. The bottom line is, not one UFO researcher can produce you an alien body. Not one researcher can produce you a definitive piece of machinery. Although some may argue that with what we now know as metamaterials, pieces or alleged fragments from recovered craft or recovered objects that are being now tested under huge microscopes and tested for various different things, there are some people who will speculate that if not now, in the near future, these metamaterials will be revealed as being off planet, that we cannot produce them ourselves, i.e., they can only produce in space. And they tend to be alloys with many known elements put together in layers that we can't manufacture and do ourselves. And some of the elements can only be created in space, as it were. So that is a possibility that sooner or later we might get a definitive piece of what's called metamaterial. And I know that there's a lot of Jacques Vallée is involved in, Gary Nolan is involved in the research of that kind of stuff. But we have yet to see definitive results that say that. But it's a possibility. And I do think that there are structured craft. I do think there have been crashes. I do think that pieces would have been retrieved. So why not? If you've got a piece and you've sent it for analysis, that would be interesting and perfectly reasonable thing to do. So I think that's a real possibility that within the next 2 or 3 years we will get some definitive scientific evidence that proves that these materials were not manufactured on Earth, and then that's going to raise a lot of questions for traditional society.
Yeah, it'll definitely raise a lot of questions. And the biggest question for me is that, are we as a society ready to accept something like that? Definitive proof that we have been visited by beings.
I actually think that we are now. I kind of agree that maybe in the 40s and 50s, maybe the 60s, we weren't. But my argument is that after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, that was the time to say, okay, let's really examine this subject and look at the evidence from around the world. And unfortunately, that opportunity was not taken. And a lot of lying has continued, especially by the United States, for many decades. And the whole pretty much world followed America's lead from the 1940s. So the stigma and secrecy that was attached continued very successfully for decades. But I think now, in the 21st century and in 2022, I think pretty much people half expect that there are aliens possibly visiting us. And if you think about it, we're only doing what aliens could be doing to us. What do? We launch space probes, we launch satellites to look for signals from alien civilizations in deep space. We send missions to the moon, we send missions to Mars. We hope to have moon bases, we hope to have Mars bases. What if a technology is 1,000 years ahead of Earth time and they've got there before us? Or what if a civilization is 1,000,000 years ahead of us and to them we're like ants? We might be the primitive ants. And if you think about all the wars that are going on in the world, and especially at the moment with Russia and Ukraine, another war, people dying for no reason. If you see what I mean, we're a very primitive warlike race. So if civilizations are out there that have developed technologies 1,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years ahead of us, they're not going to be flying in jet-powered craft. They're going to have new propulsion systems, and this is why the maneuverability of what we see now and what we've seen for the last 75 years, it's nothing new. Yes, we've all heard about the Tic Tac incident from 2004 and the incidents of 2015, the 3 FLIR forward-looking infrared radios that are being authenticated by the US Navy. But there's nothing new about the way these objects have been maneuvering. They've been reported incidents of instant acceleration, instant stop, right angle turns, triangles from the 40s and 50s. So it's nothing new. But it's kind of been reported that it is new, and it's not. It's been seen in the last 75 years, but we need to educate people to that fact. This is not just since 2004 that we've had these things. There's a rich history going back 75 years, with many cases recorded by military pilots, commercial pilots, radar operators, air traffic controllers, high caliber witnesses, often multiple corroboration, multiple radar, ground and airborne radar, etc., etc. So this is nothing new, but we need to remind people of that, because a lot of people are thinking this is just since the Tic Tac incident. It's not. Yes, the Tic Tac incident is now proven to be a bit of a game changer and a world-class case in its own right, and lots of people, lots of personnel who were involved in that are coming forward. I think there's at least 7 or 8 who've come forward now, and more are coming from that incident and others in recent years. So that's all good, but let's not forget, this is pretty much the same technology that's been described 75 years ago.
So with that, I remember hearing 2 names when it comes to the technology that we have right now and some of the jets that we have right now: Bob Lazar and John Lear.
Yep. Yeah, two fascinating characters.
Been doing reverse engineering on alien technology and creating a lot of what we have now. And then John Lear, I think that's his name.
John Lear. I mean, John Lear passed away recently, and but he was very famous in his own right as a pilot, held many records. His father was the creator of the Lear jet, so he was an aviation giant. He held some controversial views in terms of some of the things that he claimed but couldn't prove. But within his own life, he'd achieved some amazing things, all of which were proven as a pilot, etc. But he was a big supporter of Bob Lazar. I mean, I knew Stanton Friedman. I got to know him in the last few years of his life, and I had several conversations with Stanton Friedman, the nuclear physicist, who was researched and lectured on the subject for over 50 years. And he was adamant that he thought that Bob Lazar was a hoax, that his claims were bogus. As an advanced interviewer of suspects and witnesses, I looked at his body language, and I would always have to say I am persuaded in some ways towards Bob Lazar, because his body language is very good when he talks about this. He is simply really not bothered whether you believe him or not. He's not affected by difficult questions, which is hard to do if you're a liar. But there are seemingly pros and cons, and he divides opinion. Do I think that we've probably recovered UFOs from around the world, crashes? Yes. Would they have gone to the United States? Yes. So everything that would likely happen if you'd got recovered craft would happen somewhere secret, i.e. Area 51 or S4 or any number of bases, and that we would try to either make these craft work or try to recreate them in terms of technology. We would try to reproduce them to try to gain that knowledge of their technology. Now, whether we've actually done that is open to opinion. We haven't got definitive proof. What I mean by definitive proof is corroboration. We haven't got definitive corroboration to prove that we have reversed engineered crashed alien craft. But do I think that's likely to have happened in the deepest bowels of the intelligence and government circles of the United States? Yes, I probably think it has. But we can't prove it definitively.
Yeah, and the the talk is that all of the technology is there in Area 51, which is why it is, they say, it's the most protected spot in the world. Um, I have questions about it, but at the same time, I want to believe it. But like what you said, you got to be able to have the evidence to back everything up, and we're just not getting any answers from there. In fact, it was what, about 20 years ago that the U.S. government finally acknowledged the existence of their base.
I don't think it was even as long ago as that. I think it might have been in the last 10 years or so. But
I was
the
going to
key
say
thing,
that was more recently.
yeah. The key
Some
thing
reason I'm
is
thinking
that
20.
the key thing is, whilst everyone's thinking that it's Area 51, I suspect that it's not Area 51. It's just a cover, and it's at some other base that we're not aware of that doesn't get any attention. That's the logical thing that would happen. It'd be a diversion. Let everybody think that it's Area 51 or S4 when actually it's at a base 200 miles away, 400 miles away. You don't have a clue where it is, and that's good. Nobody gives it any attention. So I think the odds are that whilst there's definitely secret stealth technology definitely taking place at Area 51 and probably S4, I suspect that the real hardware is not there anymore and is elsewhere.
Yeah, well, Bill, I kind of made a guess. I guess then another base called Area 49, which is just west of Area 51. So, I mean, it
I
could
don't
be
know,
that,
but
but yeah, exactly.
but again, it's this smoke and mirrors thing. You don't have any proof. Anybody can say, well, it might be Area 49, it might be somewhere else. I suspect it's at another base, and that's all we can suggest. We can't prove that.
Yeah.
Right.
Brad just kind of said something like that too. It's just a smoke screen to keep the real location a secret.
Absolutely. I
There were a
suspect that
few
that's
other
what the intelligence services would do.
It would go along
there
with
were a few other
a lot of
questions that
what's
came
been
in.
said out there. It's like, okay, we're going to give the people this, and this so that they can focus on this and not what we really have over here. News media has been accused of doing that numerous times, and while, like you said, we have no proof that they do that, I believe that to be the case.
I certainly think that the media, mainstream media, have been pretty much complicit in downplaying the significance of the UFO subject for over 50, 60 years. I mean, are you aware of the Robertson panel, both of you?
I am not.
It does sound pretty. It sounds familiar. I feel like I have heard of it before. I just can't remember where.
All right. Well, let me give you a bit of a history lesson, brief history lesson. We live, if you're under the age of 69 years of age, you've lived in a deliberate world of debunking that stems from a specific time and place when that debunking idea was put into place. And that goes back to 1953, January of 1953, when the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, commissioned a panel of scientists to come together over 2 days. And their remit was find a way to strip the fascination that the public, the general public, the man and woman on the street have for flying saucers, which was the term of the day. And after 2 days, they formulated the idea that the way to strip the fascination is to debunk it in all forms of the media, i.e., TV, radio, film, newspaper, books, etc. And if you think about it, that policy has been incredibly successful, but it stems from that one specific decision. So anybody that's born after 1953 has lived in a world of debunking, and it was created artificially by the United States. The United States were and have been the leading player on the UFO subject literally since Roswell, and that's probably why. Smoke and mirrors, that's what they wanted. And most countries of the world followed America's lead. And going back to the media, I think that at the highest levels, the very highest levels, newspaper owners, they got briefings that said, you will not do UFO stories. You do not give any credence to this when that debunking decision was made. And so indirectly, at the very highest levels, not the majority of reporters who would be oblivious to this, but at the very senior levels, decisions were made at the highest level to downplay the UFO subject, and it worked tremendously well. But unfortunately, as technology has improved, and we now have smartphones and incredible cameras on phones, this technology is going to outrun that story. The internet, again, a creation where you can now live stream an event. Now, imagine if you look outside your window of your place where you are now, and there's a UFO hovering above your building. And imagine it was daytime. You could now go live stream that. And within seconds, it would be glowing all around the world, the story. So if we had a significant case, if you think of the Phoenix lights from 1997, it's estimated that at least 10,000 people saw this huge boomerang or wedge-shaped object traveling for approximately 200 miles across several states, the United States, before it stopped over Phoenix. And at the time, we had video cameras. Well, as we know now, video cameras use a kind of a tape, and that system is not ultimately long lasting, and the quality is poor. That's why we don't have definitive footage. But imagine if we had a Phoenix lights that happened tomorrow. It would be live streamed within seconds. The world would
Mhm.
catch fire. Everybody would be live
Yeah.
streaming, and the intelligence services, the military could not contain that anymore. So, if you now put that into the context of December the 16th, 2017, you have a seminal moment in what will be UFO history, which is the release of the front page New York Times article on the 16th of December, which highlighted a hitherto unknown secret UFO program that ran between 2007 2012 that we now know as ATIP, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, that was led by Luis Elizondo, who's become world famous in this field as the leading person involved in that. But what really has changed the dynamic uh, incredibly in terms of its ripple effects is not the actual New York Times article, important though that was. It was actually the subsequent release of the 3 forward-looking infrared radar videos recorded, captured by US Air Force US Navy pilots off the east and west coast, 2004, 2015. 3 videos: FLIR 1, the gimbal, and Go Fast. Those 3 videos were then authenticated by the US Navy, and for the first time in history, the press, who have been always really very skeptical of UFOs because of the stigma, because of the Robertson panel decision, they could legitimately look at politicians and military personnel and say, "What is that?" And it was confirmed by the US Navy as an unknown aerial object, and a craft. This was not a lights in the sky. This was not misidentification. This was not atmospheric. This was a craft. And if you listen to Commander David Fravor, who was involved in the Nimitz incident, the first pilot to go on camera, as it were, he said, we're looking at an object with no wings, no tail, no propulsion system. Looks like a Tic Tac sweet, and it was ping-ponging around, like moving in all directions like a ping pong, under control, but in a way that we can't reproduce. And at one point it zipped off in the blink of an eye. So it was there and it was gone. And then he found out just a few seconds later it was 60 miles away at his waypoint that he was traveling to. So it's as if it had either monitored the messages sent to him, go to your next waypoint and it's there, or it read his mind and went there, which is arguable as well. But the point being that these objects are real. We've gone beyond the stage of saying this is just a light in the sky. It's not. We are dealing with craft of unknown origin, seemingly maneuvering in ways that are way beyond the technology of our best fighter jets. And if you think about, in fact, I recently went to see Top Gun, the second one, the recent Top Gun film with Tom Cruise, the follow-up film to the early film many years ago in '86, I think it was. But basically, there is incredible aerial shots, genuine aerial footage in that film that's the real highlight of that film. However, they are flying F-18 Super Hornets, exactly the same aircraft that Commander David Fravor was flying when the Tic Tac ran rings around him. So you think about that. Yeah, you are watching Top Gun and thinking, wow, look at the aerial sequences. But now think about, what if they were chasing a UFO? And that's exactly what they were chasing. And the object just went by, blink of an eye, gone. And then a few seconds away, it's 60 miles away. So this is not kind of foreign technology. We're not talking Russian or Chinese kind of aircraft as kind of like indicated in the Top Gun film. This is, as what Luis Elizondo would say, not next generation, but either 50 to 1,000 years ahead of Earth time in terms of technology. Things that can move at 13,000 miles an hour, that can, like in the Nimitz incident in 2004, Kevin Day, who was the top radar guy, was monitoring these objects, multiple objects coming down from 80,000 feet, which is extremely high, way above commercial aircraft, which is normally about 35 to 40,000, way above military ceilings usually, dropping down to 50 feet, straight down, descent, vertical descent down 50 feet above the water. So from 80,000 feet, straight down and stopping on a dime, 50 feet above the water in 0.8 of 1 second. 0.8 of 1 second. Now, there is no technology on Earth that can do that, let alone anything like the inertia forces involved in that. Stopping on a dime, anything will be squashed to a pulp. This is a technology that has been around a long time, but we now are capturing it because of increased technological breakthroughs. We're getting better sensors. So this is why only recently, when there was the congressional hearing in May, they disclosed that we've now got 400 incidents of objects seen by what we believe is mostly Navy pilots, but they're not really giving us much detail. But what they're saying is it's happening with increasing frequency, and that's because the technical sensors that we have now, whether it be on aircraft or on ships, on aircraft carriers, are better than what we had. So now these things are being picked up in a way that wasn't able to be achieved before. So now, just on the air safety aspect, which is how this is all, in a sense, gathering momentum, because there is clearly an air safety, and they admitted that and reconfirmed at the congressional hearing that there'd been 11 near misses with Navy pilots. Well, do we have to wait until a pilot is killed by one of these things to take it seriously? Maybe that's already happened, but would we get told? The answer is no. We'd probably never get to hear about it. But the fact that they've admitted that there's been 11 near collisions with Navy pilots is, if you think about this now in the context of all that incredible footage in the Top Gun film, and now just substitute the unknown power aircraft, the foreign Russian or whatever aircraft it is, foreign adversary aircraft with a UFO that's seemingly of a technology that doesn't have a propulsion system, that doesn't have wings, doesn't have a tail, and can do any maneuvers what it wants in a way that we can't. So that's what we're dealing with. And unfortunately, the media are very reluctant, even now, with all that's emerged in the last 4 to 5 years. They have a real difficulty getting their heads around that this is actually real, that it has gone beyond lights in the sky. And for me, sadly, the media, the mainstream media, are holding this story back, because I've always looked at it that the New York Times articles and the 3 flare videos were like an explosion in a dam, in the center of a dam, and a few bricks have been removed, and there's a bit of water pressure building on the dam. And of course, the more the bricks start coming away, the more the pressure will be on the center of that dam. Well, eventually, I foresee that there will be some incident or series of incidents that cause that dam to break. And then when that dam breaks, it will be very swift. And then you're into a paradigm shift, which is, yeah, they're real. We don't know what they are. And they're not ours. They're not foreign adversary. And we're kind of not too far off that, in my opinion.
One statement that you made about some what would it take for us to take it seriously, or even at that point, is if somebody was killed. Do you think that people may have been killed either on purpose or not on purpose, and their deaths were covered up as either unexplained or a completely different reason, line of duty, stuff like that, throughout these years?
I think the answer to that is yes. I do believe that there have been deaths associated with the UFO phenomenon. I mean, if you go back to 1948 with pilot Thomas Mantell, he's chasing a UFO that's really high above him. He climbed to a high ceiling. It's above him. He says it's of a tremendous size. And then the next thing is his plane has crashed. Now, the popular story is that he simply thought it was Venus, and ran out of oxygen because he didn't have the oxygen to go up to the ceiling where the object was seen. He ran out of air, went into a stall and crashed. However, what they don't tell you in all these documentaries that try to explain the Mantle case as conventional is actually, if you go back to a 1956, it was actually a motion picture that was shown in the cinema, and it was called Unidentified Flying Objects, UFO, believe it or not, but Unidentified Flying Objects, and it was in the cinema. It's a documentary that you can still get on YouTube. It actually recreates the Mantle case, but from its origin, its start. And its start was that people in an air traffic, in a military base control tower, see an object through binoculars, high-powered binoculars. They see a visual sighting. Several senior military figures, officers, see and confirm that there's this object near that base. So they then vector an aircraft that's already in the air to it, i.e., Mantell, as the object takes off. But those statements from the people who saw it in the tower visually, so not just radar confirmed, but visually, they're all in the beginning. And all of the real people who were in that tower are in the recreation scene in that documentary. So if you ever see that documentary, those people who recreate the telling of the Mantle story are the real people who saw the object visually and with aided vision, i.e., binoculars, etc., and it confirmed on radar. So that was right at the start. So he's not chasing Venus. They know what Venus are. They're experts. They know what they were looking at as a different object that then moved. Well, Venus doesn't move quickly because it's a star, a planet. And so again, there are statements in Project Blue Book from those people in the tower. They're really interested, and they present a different story. So for me, Mantle chased a genuine unknown. Maybe he did run out of oxygen, but it was definitely UFO related, and it definitely was not Venus, as they claimed that it, or tried to claim that it was. So that's one case. But then you've got other cases. Lieutenant Moncler, I think a Canadian case, he disappeared whilst chasing a UFO. I think 1951, something like that, 53. You've then had a civilian pilot who was also, I believe, a military reserve, Frederick Valentich, disappears between in Australia. He disappears, and he says the object's above me, and the next thing is disappears off the screen. So there are sightings that you could make a case for, saying people have died in mysterious circumstances. So I think that's true. Can you say definitively that they're alien or whatever? No, you can't. But there are definitely some cases that you can associate. The most aggressive case that I'm aware of is a very famous case, but I bet a lot of your audience will not be aware of it. Was from 1977 in Brazil, and it's called the Calares incident. And basically, the local people in the Amazon region, so very kind of primitive people, were being attacked by UFOs that were shining akin to laser beams at them and taking blood samples from them. And some people reportedly died. And the local villagers complained enough to the local townspeople that they then got in touch with the army. The army came in, probably very reluctantly, thinking this is a load of rubbish, but they ended up staying 4 months. And we know that they had interactions with UFOs because the guy who was in charge of the operation, Captain Colonel Hollander, he went on video 2 days before he died in mysterious, strange circumstances. He allegedly hung himself off his bed. Not an easy thing to do, I would say. But he went on camera 2 days before he died and said, I ran that program, and we had lots of cine footage. We had huge objects seen during the 4 months there. So there's a lot of that is the one case where I would say there was an aggressive act that was repeated by these things. But I'm not really aware of any other kind of case like that. So on the whole, what we could say is that after 75 years of the modern era of ufology, there's very, very few cases that suggest that there is malicious intent. And if people try to say it's going to be like an Independence Day invasion, well, there doesn't appear to be any tangible evidence to say that that is the case, because in my opinion, they've been around for 75 years at least, probably a lot longer. And had they have wanted to with the technology they possess, they could have. So I think the real argument is they're here, and what do they want, and can we, or has there been any kind of genuine contact from some portions of humanity, i.e., the Americans or whatever, who were the dominant nation on the subject. Have they had contact, official contact? We don't know. It's buried under the secrecy of need to know, and you and I will never get to know that because we don't have the necessary classification to know. But what it goes to, back to your earlier question, I think that there is a case now for saying, look, I think the world can handle this. We have to now start coming together, not as one nation, as one species, the human race. This is what's happening. Doesn't just affect the United States airspace, it's happening in all countries of the world, whether they admit it or not. It's been happening in all countries of the world for 75 years. Pretty much every country of the world have had sightings. And it's about time that we recognize that the game is up, that we are dealing with craft. And in the last year, we've gone through a fascinating development. A year, 18 months ago, if somebody had said to a UFO researcher, you're in a three-way tie with American technology, foreign technology, or alien, most UFO researchers would say, I'll take those odds, because it was only three-way. Well, as a result of the information that's come out during 2021, the Americans are saying it ain't us. Luis Elizondo is saying it ain't us. Chris Mellon's saying it ain't us. So that only leaves you in a two-horse race. You're in a two-horse race with foreign technology or other. Well, I still think that the media still are struggling to get their heads around this, and they want to call it other. They want to call it foreign technology. But if you listen to Chris Mellon, and he should know, and Luis Elizondo, he should know, they're saying that it's less than a 1% chance that it's foreign adversary, because the technological capabilities of these objects is so beyond anything so far that we can replicate. So, the odds of it being foreign technology are virtually nil. And unfortunately, the press don't want to let go of that. And they're still promoting that, because it's far easier to get your head around a foreign technology than it is possibly extraterrestrial or interdimensional craft coming from elsewhere. And I understand that. But sooner or later, that's the way it's going to go. And that foreign adversary angle will be ruled out. And I don't expect the President of the United States to stand on the White House lawn and saying aliens are here. I don't think they're ever going to admit that. But I think through a process of elimination, they may have no choice.
President.
But what I'm saying, before we go down the line of political differences, let's just say I don't see any president admitting that they're alien. But what they might have to do by a process of elimination is admit that it's definitely not foreign adversary and it's not American, and that only leaves the one other area, which is other. And all the ufologists will go, yes, we told you so. But that's as good as you're going to get, I think. They're never going to reveal all the secrets of Roswell. I don't think they're ever going to say, oh, look, we do have some alien bodies. Do you want to look at them? We'll bring them up to the surface. I don't think they're ever going to do that. I just think that they might, because the way technology is going, might just have to reluctantly admit that it isn't foreign adversary, that the technology is too great, and therefore it does appear to be other. That's what will cause your paradigm shift. That will be enough, because when the mainstream media report that enough, that it's other, then you're on that paradigm shift, which basically will be the most profound moment in human history, which is official contact is acknowledged.
I definitely do believe that we have had first contact of some kind. What kind, I don't really know, but I do believe that we have had first contact of some kind long ago.
I do.
Right.
I do. And in my capacity as being the vice president of ICER, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, we've now got national representatives in 30 countries. And these people have all sworn an oath and signed an oath that says, based on the evidence of the last 75 years, we believe that the evidence says that we're dealing with something that is extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence. So that allows for possibly interdimensional, but it's non-human. The evidence is there collectively, circumstantially, over the 75 years of research, that there's something interacting with the human race, and it's not human. And I think that's where we're at. And so we've also done something that's quite unique, I think, for an international NGO, is to put out a statement that says, actually, ISA believes that the case for want of a better expression, the abduction phenomena is proven. Because if you look at all countries around the world, they all have their own abduction accounts. Even in the third world, where you don't have access to TV, radio, newspaper, internet, etc., the cases, the commonalities are the same. So we put out a statement a few months ago, and I think it was in October of 2021, saying, look, we don't know the answers. We don't know everything. But we think that there's enough evidence there collectively around the world to say that there is some kind of interactive with a species or species with the human race. And that then accounts for your abduction scenario. Or the contact.
The most famous one of that, at least for here, is Travis Walton.
Yeah, I know Travis.
Yeah, Travis Walton I was going to bring up.
Yeah. And there's also another one. I want to say his name is Benny.
Barney and Betty Hill from 1961.
Yes.
Barney and Betsy Hill. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
1961.
Those two are the ones that come to mind right away.
Yep, I know that one.
Well, they're both famous American cases, but there were earlier cases than that. There was a case in South America in 1957. So they weren't the first, but the Barney and Betty Hill case has become a modern classic, and so has Travis Walton, obviously made into a film, Fire in the Sky, with James Garner, D.B. Sweeney, and a pretty good film. But I've talked to Travis on a number of occasions. I had him over in the UK as a guest at my own magazine conference, and he actually has changed his opinion to the point where he says, at first he used to think that when he got zapped by the object that they were trying to kill him, but now he concluded no, actually they did hit him accidentally, and that they then tried to save him and revived him over those 5 days that he was missing. They saved his life, so he now thinks they saved his life. But it's an amazing story, and there's quite a lot of corroboration to it in terms of the people that were there, the circumstances, the police involvement, and also strange physical aspects that would indicate that something strange happened, i.e. the trees in the vicinity of where it took place. The tree growth has been accelerated as if it's been affected by some kind of radiation or some external force. The tree ring data doesn't match the outline trees to the ones where it happened. So there's something strange going on there, and I think Travis is very very compelling, and I can't prove it personally, but I think it's a very compelling case.
With the radiation that you just brought up, somebody was asking a question earlier.
Yeah,
we were still being
for that right now. It was
I think it was Jill that was asking that. She was asking about if we were still being affected by radiation. Rather, I don't know if she was asking if we were being affected by radiation from UFOs or possibly radiation from our own stuff that was reverse engineered.
Yeah, I think this might be it. With
no, not that one.
Wait, no, this one right here. This is the one.
No, she specifically. Okay, yeah.
No, wait, we already asked that one.
There does seem to be a correlation between people who get close to some UFOs, as in craft. Several people, and in particular, if you think of the Rendlesham from Forest incident, going back to the UK in December 1980, several people subsequently went on to have medical issues because they came into contact with some form of radiation. And that happened to at least 3 people who developed illnesses by supposedly, and they were asked, have you been exposed to nuclear material? Well, yes and no. Yes, they were guarding tactical nuclear weapons, and they didn't want to admit that because they were under security oaths. But several had come into close proximity with landed or UFOs seen at close proximity, and had developed medical symptoms afterwards. So there does seem to be a correlation between some people are affected, some people not. But I do know of people who've, in fact, it's more than three. I can think of at least now 4 people, probably 5 people from Rendlesham who definitely had medical illnesses that seemingly resulted from being in close proximity to craft.
Right. And that's the question that that I was referring to. It was actually
It was
Wayne
Wayne,
that asked.
not. Yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't
I was
Wayne who
thinking it
asked
was.
that one. That was one I wanted to ask earlier. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Jill's been asking a lot of questions here. Wayne had another
Yes.
question too, which was, what? Yeah, I know. We got a lot of them. What do you think about the, I guess you call it the Anunnaki being extraterrestrial beings and the Nephilim being their off their offspring?
It's a great
Oh,
story, but can you prove it? And the answer is no. Is there physical evidence to prove that story?
Okay.
No. But is it possible?
Mm-hmm.
Potentially. But can you prove it? No.
Okay, and then we have another question. This one, sorry, I'm having issues with my clicking today. Joe also asks if we have discovered some of their crash landed vehicles, isn't it plausible to say we have been reverse engineering them, the technology, so they are monitoring how far we are coming along?
I think that's entirely possible and has probably happened. Can I prove it? No. Can you prove it? No.
Okay.
But the reality is that unfortunately the way the human race is, everything's about weaponization and technology.
Mm-hmm.
Can it be weaponized? And that's a sad downside to humankind, because that's not what we should be doing. We should be trying to achieve technology for the betterment of mankind, not to destroy other people potentially. But the current thinking has always been that if you could recover a crashed UFO, hypothetically, if you could recover a crashed UFO and then find out how that craft had traveled the distance it's traveled across space, and harness that technology, that you would then become the most significant power on the earth. Well, some people might argue that that's exactly what's happened in terms of Roswell in 1947. If that was a recovered craft, did we get some of it working? And that's maybe why America went on to become a superpower. However, the downside to that argument is that if we believe the likes of Chris Mellon and Luis Elizondo, well, what we've achieved in reverse engineering is like a poor comparison to the genuine technology. Some people speculate, but there's no proof either way. Some people speculate that if there was a crash disk recovered from Roswell, that we've not even learned how to switch it on yet. That's kind of what you're dealing with, and I suspect the latter might be the case. But then, if you then listen to the likes of Bob Lazar, and if you think that his story is compelling, then it would seem that there has been lots of recovered craft, and that we have got some of them to work. And the odds are that if we did have one land on the White House lawn and crash tomorrow, it would get sealed off, it would get carted away, never to be seen again. And if it didn't work, we would get our top and brightest engineers all around the world to say, try to make this work. So it's perfectly feasible that if we did recover a crashed alien craft, we would try to replicate it and harness that technology. But mostly it would be for military ways.
One question I want to bring up to you, when you were talking earlier about people disappearing or trying to chase after something in their planes, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on Flight 19?
I mean, that relates to the Bermuda Triangle, and The thing that's really baffling about Flight 19 is not Flight 19 for me. It's the fact that when they disappeared, the 5 aircraft disappeared, they then spent out a transport aircraft to search the area. What is baffling is that that transport aircraft also disappeared. Now, the general story, the skeptical story, is that the 5 airmen in the 5 aircraft got disorientated, couldn't find a location marker, eventually ran out of fuel, crashed into the sea, and died. But the planes have never been recovered. However, how do you explain the transport aircraft that's going out hours later trying to look for them that then disappears? The odds of that happening are extremely slim, in my opinion. So it's a fascinating case, but it's the second aircraft that I think is the real odd case. But who knows?
Yeah, especially with all the different disappearances that they've had in Bermuda, in the Bermuda Triangle. Um, and there have been numerous cases of similar things happen, not just with the Bermuda Triangle, but there's also like the Alaskan Triangle, and it seems like they got triangles everywhere now. You
Well,
name
I
it.
think
Yeah,
I think
there's also the dragons. There's also the
I think
Dragons
there's
Triangle out near Japan too.
yeah it would seem that there are kind of mysterious regions all across the earth
Yeah.
where strange things happen. And if we go back to the
Hmm.
earlier, is there a possibility of portals? Well, I guess that might have something to do with it. There are certainly areas around the globe that strange things happen um, with increased frequency that goes beyond coincidence.
Mhm.
Jill made a comment actually one point saying regarding in the Alaska Triangle, hidden. I think she might also be talking about the show because I watched the show. A hidden base in Mount Hayes. It's not discovered publicly nor acknowledged apparently. So you got another one of those like again supposedly hidden bases
I'm
up in Alaska.
Well, it's a pretty remote place. I think it's entirely possible that there will be, bases built into the side of mountains. We've got Cheyenne Mountain where, it's a big military complex, but we're aware of that. But I'm sure
Mhm.
that with the drilling technology that we have, there are all manner of strange facilities hidden away. And of course, if you think of the United States, it's an absolutely huge country. Canada, huge country. So there are any number of places you could have secret bases. Uh, but can you prove them definitively? I think the answer would be no.
Now,
Nope.
Brad, he had actually another interesting question. He says, "Do you feel like all the stuff that is being released by governments, like the stuff that is to prepare us for an upcoming event or revelation?"
I'd like to think yes. Uh, the answer is probably no, but I'd like to think yes. There's certainly the developments that took place in 2021 collectively. Uh, the year 2021 for me was the most important year in UFO history, bar 1947 and the seminal, Kenneth Arnold and Roswell within 2 weeks of each other, kind of thing.
Right.
But last year was phenomenal. Literally every month there was something happening that was incredible, whether it be a senator or a former CIA or former military official, former government official, former presidents going on the record, as well as all the legislative little maneuvers that were taking place that ultimately resulted in the GRG amendment becoming law in December of 2021. So that then compelled, for the first time in history, the intelligence services of the United States to report in both classified and unclassified reports to Congress and the Senate. That never happened before. It's an incredible thing. And I think the first uh, public unclassified report is due to be released in October. So I think we're into unprecedented territory, and things are just it's been quiet this first 4 or 5 months of 2022, but things are just beginning to warm up a bit. For example, in May, you had the first U.S. congressional hearing, public hearing live on TV for the first time in over 50 years. So that's a major thing. So Senator Andre Carson, who was the lead panel, lead person hosting it, fair play to him, well done. A lot of the questions were very poor, I would have to say, but it was still a worthwhile and unprecedented thing, bringing this subject more to the media's attention.
Speaking of
But
hearings, you got one coming
next,
up soon.
well, I was just going to say that next Friday, on Wednesday, I will fly out to Brazil to appear before uh, Brazil's first ever historic public hearing. So, like the same as the congressional hearing, I will be there to brief the Brazilian Senate. It's a huge honor for me to brief the Brazilian Senate on the UAP issue globally. And obviously, my role as the vice
That's awesome.
president of ISA and representing 30 countries, I'm well positioned to do that. But it's a huge honor, an opportunity to give them a kind of slice of evidence that they're not getting from their own intelligence services, i.e., biased or managed. I will give it as it is, the best evidence that's been accumulated over the last 75 years. I will give a selection of cases that points the global nature of this phenomenon and its history, i.e., going back 75 years. So this is a huge thing. I think it's going to be covered live on Brazilian TV. Uh, at the moment, I'm not aware of whether it's going to be run live by mainstream televisions from around the world, but I hope so because it is historic. Bar the American congressional hearing that you just had, this will be the first one outside of the United States to ever hold a public hearing before the government where the public can watch and be in attendance and listen in. So this is historic. Luis Elizondo, I believe he's going to be there along with Robert Salas. Robert Salas, obviously, the man involved in the Maelstrom incident from 1967, an amazing case. Luis Elizondo ran the secret Pentagon ATIP program. So, along with, I think, 8 Brazilian researchers talking about Brazilian cases. But I think I'm just one of 3 international speakers to talk about, to brief the Senate. So it's a huge honor, an opportunity to get the truth out to a wider audience. Because don't forget, most countries of the world followed America's lead and downplayed the subject and trivialized it and ridiculed it and stigmatized it. That was what pretty much all countries of the world did. So that stigma is finally going after the release of the Fleur files and the New York Times article in 2017. But it's still there, and it's still there because it's not on the mainstream news, left, right, and centre, and it should be. You will know when the term disclosure happens. And I always say you'll know about it because if there was a terrorist incident in any country, it's wall to wall. Recently you've had some terrible shootings, school shootings, and that's wall to wall, 24/7 news coverage. Well, you'll know that we've hit the point of no return in terms of no going back, and we're into a new paradigm. Is when it's 24/7 on the news that contact has been made. And I do think that time is approaching. Now, it may not seem like it, but where logically can this go? We're getting more transparency, albeit still kicking and screaming. The intelligence services really don't want to play ball. I really believe that. They're doing it reluctantly, but they're now required by law to come up with these reports. And even in the congressional hearing, they admitted that they've now got 400 cases. Last year, when they did the intelligence report that came out on June the 25th, 2021, they said they had 144 cases. They could only explain one. So they left it 143 they couldn't explain. Well, now they're saying they've got 400 that can't explain. And that's just literally within a matter of a few months. So there's real pressure beginning to mount. And the more it mounts, the more detail comes out about these events, of which they're being very scarce. But Luis Elizondo will say that he has seen some high quality daylight footage with objects seen like literally hovering just beside the plane in midair. That's in high quality video. We're not talking blurry, fuzzy, long distance. And he's seen that footage, and he's frustrated that it's not been released. And we know that in the classified briefings that have been given to the Senate and Congress, that in June 20, prior, I think it was June the 17th, 2021, there was a classified briefing for the Senate and Congress, and I think they showed them 40 minutes of video. And apparently, some of the senators and Congress people had hairs on the back of their necks, because for the first time, they saw objects that they could not identify and moved in ways that apparently made the hairs go on the back of their neck. So, but that's in the classified world. Now, my argument with that is, I think all that footage should be released. Yes, you can cover it up and take the bits of system data and the height and the, where it was filmed, but just the raw footage of the object, surely we can release just the pictures of the object live, as it were, and just center in on that. And I think the public can handle that, and I think we're ready to handle that in 2022. But there's definitely momentum growing, and who knows what the ramifications will be from the Brazilian Senate. I mean, in recent days, we've had China say, no, we might have detected signals in space that could be alien, and then you've had, strangely or by coincidence, basically the head of the equivalent of NASA in Russia saying, there could be aliens that are surveilling us, basically looking at us. Now, we know that other countries, Japan has got to set up a task force. We know that other countries are looking at setting up other task forces. The point is, we're in a different mindset now. The genie is out the bottle. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle. Those 3 videos with the genie that's got out, we have legitimate footage that's unexplained, can't explain how they moved, etc., etc. So we now are in a different ballgame. You have what I would call celebrity scientists like Michio Kaku, who basically used to be very skeptical of UFOs, but then saw the FLIR videos and changed his position 180 degrees. And he says now it's, tell me they're not alien, prove to me they're not alien. So he's completely changed, come full circle. He is now looking at the evidence, as he should do, and then saying, no, I don't know what this is. I can't explain that. So this looks to me like alien. Now it's for the skeptics to prove otherwise. So it's a total shift. But the mainstream media are not on board yet. Not enough. So yeah, there's little bits of reporting here and there, and they're following it quietly in the background, because I talk to journalists myself, and they're aware of what's going on, but not enough is being done up front. And but sooner or later, the pressure is growing for that dam to break. And I think when it breaks, it will be very quick. And then it's like, yeah, it ain't foreign technology, it ain't American, it is other. And then all the huge implications from that.
Do you think any of those 40 minutes will ever be revealed?
I would hope so. Because I think it's getting to the stage where the media do realize that they have been hoodwinked. I've talked to several members of the press and privately, and they do realize that there is a story there now, and they're just starting to get to grips with it, or some of them are. They know they've been lied to. They know that America has been the worst country for lying about it and setting the course for the way that the subject has been dealt with. America has a lot to answer for. But from my point of view, there is no point in, what would be good is that they admit that they did it. And they could say, well, we did it for what we thought was the right reasons, i.e. you weren't ready. There was things going on that we've not revealed, that, were a real threat to the humanity. We don't know. There may have been legitimate reasons, but when it comes out, I think it would be just a question of saying, go on the stand and say, what part did you play? What did you cover up? Tell us your involvement in that cover up. And then we say, okay, thank you. You're on the record. We now have an amnesty. Because what's the point? Are we going to send these people to prison? What's that going to achieve? It's done. But what we want is them to reveal that they've been involved in a cover up. And I think the public would want that when this story emerges. So for me, it would be a bit like what they had in South Africa with the apartheid regime. They had truth and reconciliation hearings. And I think that's kind of what may come eventually when there is this breakthrough. Because I think some people will be very angry that they've been lied to for decades about what they had seen. And don't forget, people have committed suicide because they saw something, they told somebody, it got in the papers, they were ridiculed so much that they killed themselves. That's an unforgivable thing. People have lost their lives. So there is an accountability to all of this. Yeah, there's an accountability, but I don't go down the line of saying we should throw these people in prison. I don't think it should be done like that. I think there has to be just an acceptance that it was a different time, political era, Cold War, whatever. There may be genuine reasons why they were the right things to do. But I think we can handle it now, but we've got to move on. But I do think that there is a chance that that footage will come out because we get into the stage where technology is going to force its hand. And like I said, if the Phoenix Lights happen tomorrow, I think we'd be in the game changer there. If ever there was a mass incident now, it would be all live streamed and go viral within minutes. And the technology is so good now that the intelligence services would not be able to shut the internet down quick enough. As one was closed down, another one would open up and pass on the stream. So the cat would be out of the bag. So I think if you had a Phoenix Lights incident now, it would be a game changer and it would happen. And that paradigm shift would be the result tomorrow. If things don't happen, then we're going to, people like myself and other researchers are going to still try to push for pressure. But there does seem to be a momentum gathering that says, yeah, okay, technology is moving at a pace. We do need to address this, albeit they're wrapping it up in the air safety aspect, which is fine by me, because if it gets the subject talked about in the mainstream, then all well and good. It's still a positive. And that's why at the moment, I'm more than happy to keep talking about being in a two-horse race with foreign technology, because I know that for every case that is analysed by scientists, we do need scientists to scrutinize all the data, etc. But the more that data is released to scientists for them to examine, the more I am confident that they're going to come back and saying this isn't terrestrial technology. We can't replicate it. And I think that's when you get to the game changer point of view in the long haul, through evidence, through science. We'll prove it through maneuverability.
No, I just got to point this out because I know I showed it a few times.
Ready for the truth.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, right there. Okay. Now, see, that's something that I want. I want the truth. I don't. Everybody hates being lied to, and we have been lied to for generations. Not just about this, but for many other things. But the one thing that I've always wondered about is that we're being visited by aliens that are eons ahead of us. There is, when you really think about it, there is nothing that we can do to stop them from letting themselves be known if they want to be, unless by some chance they got some kind of a deal that's been made and they're holding up to the deal. But again, if they really wanted to do something, they are so far ahead of us that there is absolutely nothing that we can do to stop them short of a nuclear bomb. And if that would even stop them.
Well, I would argue that that's the position that we've been in for 75 years. We're totally defenseless. The technology is way too advanced for us. But by the same token, you can take it the other way and say, well, they seem to be 99.9% benign. You know, if they'd have wanted to take over, they could have. They'd certainly have the technological means to invade if that was the case, but they've not done so. But don't forget that, like I said right at the beginning of the show, we're a very primitive, warlike race. If they do, I mean, if you were in the playground, and you remember at school, you're walking around the playground and you saw a pile of ants on the floor, would you kneel down and start talking to the ants and have a conversation with the ants? Well, we wouldn't, because we think, no, we're far superior to the ants. But what if we're the ants and they're so superior? Why would they talk to us if we're so primitive? You know, there's an arrogance to mankind, and there's an arrogance to many scientists who just implicitly believe that, you know, we're real special. Well, we might be real special, but by the same token, we might not be special. And we might actually just be a very, very primitive race, and we're just on the first rungs of the intergalactic corridor, as it were, a ladder. You know, maybe they're not ready to speak to us. But by the same token, if we recovered craft in 47 with Roswell, and, you know, Luis Elizondo seems to think that that was a real case. Chris Mellon kind of thinks the same thing. So I would think they should know better than me, better than you. So I think that, you know, if there was something recovered in 47, which I believe there was, if there were bodies recovered, were any of them alive? Who knows? The stories, but they're just stories. But if we did, and there were bodies recovered, then somebody has known the truth for a long time. We had the earlier question as to being contact. Who knows? What you've got to understand is, and I say this all the time, is that in the public domain, i.e. the newspapers, what we have, you know, that we can look on the internet, open source, we only know at best 10% of this subject. The 90% is hidden away under government secrecy and intelligence agency secrecy, where we don't have the need to know classification to be told about it. I mean, you think about presidents have asked and they've been told, nope, you don't have the need to know. Now, what does that tell you? That there is a real story there. And if they're not going to tell a president or some presidents, then that's a pretty powerful body that says you're not ready to learn this news. So there's all manner of ways of looking at this, but I think it's entirely possible that we did recover a craft, entirely possible that we did recover bodies, and that there has probably been many retrievals of craft from all around the world. Do I think that there's retrieval teams from America that are sent all over the world? Yes, I do. And I think there are a lot of cases that would suggest that American teams have gone in. And if you go back to the famous Brazilian case that I told you about, Colares, where the people, local people, tribes people, were being attacked, that operation was shut down after 4 months suddenly. But we then learned that the Americans go in Brazil. So they kind of turn up all over the place. And America has had its fingers very much in all the pies when it comes to the best UFO cases in history. Pretty much, I guess, bar China and Soviet Union, which were off limits. But pretty much else, the Americans pretty dominated everything. But we have to get away from that one country. And Luis Elizondo has said that at conferences in the last year or so, where he said, no, we have to come away from the one country leading the issue on this. It has to be all countries coming together. And that's, in a sense, my remit, I see as part of my remit as the Vice President of ISA, is to say, look, this is not a one country issue. It's a worldwide single human race issue. And all countries now should be getting rid of the stigma and saying, look, okay, let's lay our cards on the table. Yeah, we've had some sightings. We don't know what they are, but let's sit down around the table and let's all get our heads together. How do we deal with this? There is an issue here. We need to deal with it. And that's what I'm hoping will begin to happen over the next few years. I think there will be more and more countries, albeit reluctantly, probably having to examine exactly what's going on. But remember, if an incident were to happen now, a mass incident that would happen now, tomorrow, or the next day, the next week, we'd be into paradigm shift straight away through live streaming. The intelligence services, the governments could not control a live streaming event now. So we're literally a second away from a major incident development that would be a game changer. But I think that the authorities know that, and therefore they realize that we are very close to that kind of scenario happening. And perhaps they are now thinking, well, better to get it out on our terms than be pressured into it in a beyond our control through a live event, streaming event. Yeah. If you're going to kind of tell the truth of what you know, maybe you tell it now under your own steam. Maybe you repackage it in a certain way. But I think there's all of those elements to it. We are on an inevitable collision with new technology from elsewhere, and that's what set in motion with 2017. And I think that the 3 videos were deliberately leaked to achieve that, and they've pretty much started to do that because of the ripple effect. And if you think about, you drop a stone, and then it splashes in the water, and then it says ever widening ripples. Well, that's what's happened with the release of those 3 FLIR videos. The ripples are still going on, and as the technology is increasing, as the incidents are increasing, the ripples are going to reach a stage where the dam's going to break. It'll put pressure on the center of the dam. It's going to give way, and we're into a paradigm shift. We are getting close.
The truth that you're
Now,
talking and being repackaged, that brings up Jesse Marcel to me, the guy that found the wreckage. I think, and it it was shown that he had this diary that initially they thought that he wrote, and they discovered that the handwriting in that diary does not match Jesse Marcel's handwriting. That it was somebody else. And to my knowledge, they don't know who wrote it. And a lot of stuff that's written down in there isn't completely doesn't completely make sense. And they think that there is a hidden message in that diary that tells the truth of what actually happened in Roswell, but it's coded in such a way that it's almost impossible to decode it. Have you heard about that?
Well, yeah. Well, don't forget that there's been kind of like deathbed video messages taken by the press officer involved in the Roswell case. So he basically said it. He was led into a room thinking that they were having a press conference about these strange pieces of craft, but that it was all substituted for balsa wood and bits of tin foil, and they tried to say it was just a downed little weather balloon. He later
Right.
admitted and said, "No, I was told in no uncertain terms, you will say nothing, and this is what we're going to be saying to the public." So whitewash. But there was later a video message that basically, and there's been several where people who were involved in the Roswell case have said, no, we're dealing with bodies that weren't human, that this is a non-human incident, and it was real. So there's a lot of hugely compelling testimony for me for Roswell, and I know Don Schmitt. Don Schmitt is the top world's researcher on Roswell, author of several books with his friend Tom Carey and other books. But Don Schmitt, I've become quite close to because he's the continental director for North America, and we regularly have Zoom conversations, often weekly. So, I'm well versed in some of the evidence that he's aware of that most people aren't. And Roswell is very compelling, and I think if you listen carefully to Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon, people who are within the machinery of the the official channels, as it were, they've heard things that would suggest to them that there is some real substance to Roswell, and I think there is. I do think we recovered a crashed alien disc or craft of some description and or bodies, but I think it's a real incident. It was covered up, and the excuses of the weather balloon was a lie. The excuses later of amorphic dummies, crash test dummies, was a lie, and it's a bit embarrassing, really, because you just the Air Force does not come out well, and I think it's quite ironic actually at the moment if we talk about all of the positive stuff that's coming out now is with U.S. Navy pilots, but don't forget the U.S. Air Force were the dominant party in the research with Project Blue Book, Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book. They had years, decades of working on the subject, and yet here it is now, the Navy. Well, as Chris Mellon has wrote some really pertinent pieces, what about the Air Force? Why aren't they coming forward with all their cases? They're being really, really quiet. And so it makes you wonder whether there is actually some division between the Navy and the Army and the Air Force as to what they will reveal. And perhaps the Navy has said, well, and it's ended up on our shoulders because of the Tic Tac incident 2004. We're now going to be more transparent than you ever were. But it's very strange that the Air Force are more transparent and not giving any details of how many. Because I mean, it's pretty silly. The Air Force, in a sense, dominate the sky and the terrestrial main area in terms of land mass of the United States. So you'd think proportionately they would have many, many more cases than what the Navy would have, which is on the fringes of the land mass. And yet it's all about the Navy. So I suspect there is a rivalry between those armed forces. But fortunately, it would seem that the Navy is being more transparent than the Air Force ever was. Don't forget that Project Blue Book was nothing more than a public relations exercise. It was not a real investigation of the truth. There were some periods when there was some genuine research done, but for the vast majority of time, they were just out to debunk it because of the Robertson panel. And it worked for many, many years, but technology is gathering at a pace now, and we're in unprecedented times. And I certainly think that things are hotting up, and we're not too far away from having the mainstream media having to really give it more coverage than they want to. They're going to get to a point where they don't have a choice but to cover it more widely. And I think that's when you're getting close to a paradigm shift and a breakthrough.
Interesting you would bring up the Navy because this thought just popped up in my head. When you mentioned earlier in the show how we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the depths of our ocean, and then bringing up the Navy and the Air Force, with the technology that they would have, would it be ridiculous to theorize that there might be some underwater bases that we are not aware of, and that could be a reason why we don't know that much about the ocean?
Well, as I said to you earlier, we only know 5-6% of the ocean. So that's 96% we don't know, or 94%. I think it's hugely plausible that in our deepest ocean trenches that we've got either alien bases or some kind of non-human bases, and that's why they're seen coming in and out of large bodies of water all over the world. I think there are probably bases all around the world, and we just don't know about many of them. But if you've got a technology that's so far in advance of our own, they could be right next to us and we'd never see them because of some kind of camouflage capability. And that's, I suspect, what's happened. I think, you often, one of my favorite science fiction films is The Abyss, a great Hollywood film about an underwater mining team having a problem on the seabed and getting rescued by aliens that live in the deepest ocean trenches. And it's, I think, probably not too far off the truth. I'm sure there are bases underwater. How long they've been here, what their remit is, who knows. But I think there's a lot of credible evidence to say that there's a huge correlation between UFOs being seen entering bodies of water and leaving bodies of water. And if you think of the recent videos, there's that the splashdown one. Jeremy Corbell supplied a video where it shows the object suddenly just above the water, dropping down just above the surface of the water, and then it's gone, and they're marking the position where it went under the sea. Uh, I'm not sure it did go under the sea. I think that UFOs have the ability to be visible 1 minute and invisible the next. So I think it blinks out to invisibility rather than go beneath the sea. But who knows? But there's no question that lots of military personnel around the world from ships have seen UFOs both entering the water and coming out of the water. And if you think of the Tic Tac incident, when Commander David Fravor first saw it, it was above an area of white water, which he said was the size of a 737 plane under the surface. So it appeared to show the outline of something just under the surface. What that was, we don't know. But again, it suggests that there was some kind of larger craft underwater, and maybe the Tic Tac object came from that. Who knows?
Now, with the abyss, and you mentioning that it might be pretty close to the truth, that brings another question. With all the films out there and all the TV series out there, like Independence Day, the X-Files. There actually is a TV series right now called Project Blue Book. Do you think that any of the shows out there, even though that they all have creative liberties and in a lot of cases ridiculous liberties, but I won't get into that, do you think any of them could be really close to the truth of what we may not perceive but may actually be?
I would honestly say that as much as I like science fiction and like alien type series, I think the closest one for me would be The Invaders from the 1960s, the classic series from the 60s that I grew up watching, American series, The Invaders. That basically was just that there is a cover up, that there is craft, they are flying around, there are aliens, and it was all being covered up. And this was kind of portrayed in a very famous 60s series called The Invaders. I don't think any really modern film has got it right. And going back to the Top Gun, I put a piece out on my Facebook page where I said I've just come back from watching the film, and I could not help but think that on the big screen, if you'd have substituted the foreign aircraft that was involved in one of the chases towards the end of the film with a Tic Tac or a cube, as has often been reported by US Navy pilots, a disc within a cube has passed between planes at close proximity on several occasions, apparently, and frightened the pilots and shook them. I think if you'd have put that on the big screen, then we might not be having this discussion, because people would be like blown away, and they were flying exactly the same planes as what Tom Cruise was, in the storyline. So we're not far away. It's just the way we address it. But I think we're far closer now to a what I would call a disclosure moment, a breakthrough moment, than at any time in my life, and I'm now 62,
Right.
so a long time. But I think that we're closer now to a breakthrough than we've ever been, and I think human technology, is increasing the pace to that conclusion, because we can't cover it up for much longer. Or basically, the authorities can't cover it up for much longer because the technology is growing at a pace. And like I said, we would be in a disclosure moment tomorrow if we had another Phoenix Lights tomorrow, because we could not control the live streaming.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like
Right.
ever since the whole Roswell incident, everything just blew up from there. And from what I have looked into our past, is that there has been suggestions of evidence for centuries. Um, one
Well,
for example, in Da Vinci's paintings, it looked like he painted a UFO in one of his paintings.
absolutely. No, no, you then go towards the ancient alien hypothesis, and I'm a big interest in that because it suggests very strongly from cave art and petroglyphs around the world that
Hmm.
there have been probably frequent visits in the past. But the only difference is when it's so old, you cannot prove it. It's a theory, but it's a persuasive theory. And I think they
Yeah,
have probably come here for a long time, but we can't actually prove it in terms of evidential terms. You can't prove it definitive. So I tend to stick to the modern era, which is the last 75 years, where people like
right.
me have been studying these things. And you do have statements recorded at the time, you do have corroboration, you do have radar data. And so that's where you prove it on what's called a circumstantial evidence case. Most cases that go to court in the world go at trial use a circumstantial evidence case because it's very rare that the police have all the pieces of the jigsaw. So they have enough pieces of the jigsaw to charge somebody, to then put it to a trial for then a jury to decide, well, these are the pieces, what do you think? Well, I think we're a bit like that with ufology. We have some pieces, but we don't have enough definitive pieces. But I think if you put collectively around the world the best evidence from the military pilots, commercial pilots, all around the world, air traffic controllers, sonar operators, radar operators, police officers, those kind of things, these high caliber witness categories from all around the world over the last 75 years, you then have this huge body of thousands of highly credible people who are not mistaken, often corroborated. So I think if we look at it in that basis, it's hugely compelling that we have got a non-human presence interacting with planet Earth.
Right. And the most baffling for me personally um, would be those Nazca lines because
Well,
nobody knew
I mean,
any, nobody knew
yeah, I
anything
mean
about that until we actually had flight.
yeah, I mean that's right. I mean the Nazca lines are fascinating because they can really only be really viewed from the air. So
Yeah.
why would you do thing and how would you get the proportions right? There's some really intricate, really well laid out straight lines, and how can you do that when you can't see it from above? It's bizarre. It's
Yeah.
bizarre, but it's a mystery. But it's a mystery we'll never actually be able to prove because it's an ancient mystery. And like I
Hmm.
said, I think it's persuasive, but it's not actual evidence of alien contact or
Right.
contact that we've had. We can't prove it definitively. I'd like to think that we are much closer with the evidence and research over the last 75 years that we could prove it. We're on the brink of proving it.
I hope that it is in our lifetime that we do get that definitive proof. Um, is it
Absolutely. I mean,
likely?
I think
Yeah.
that within 5 years we're edging towards a breakthrough, if not sooner. But within 5 years, I think, hopefully in my lifetime, certainly within your lifetimes, it will happen, and then we're into a different paradigm. And as we come to the end of the show, because it's 3 a.m. in the morning here, I think we're
Yeah.
close. I think we're edging close to that paradigm shift.
Well, I do want to say this. First of all, thank you for being on this show.
You're
We
welcome.
had
Yes, thank you.
people. Yeah, Joe was saying thank you. Brad was as well.
Yeah,
We we're definitely going to want to have you come back, and if you're able to talk about what happened at the conference there down in Brazil.
Absolutely. I'll get back to you. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. So let's see what happens with Brazil. You never know. I might make a complete fool of myself, but hopefully I won't. But it will be interesting to see what their reactions are and what the other countries of the world make of what comes from that. hopefully it'll be all positive. So yeah, I'm happy to come back in due course. A few months' time, we'll come down and we'll have a chat.
Yeah,
I
it
actually
would
just
be.
have one quick question.
Go
I
on then,
actually do
quick
have one
question.
quick question just before we go, which is I looked at the website, by the way, because I know you guys have had previous UFO conferences. Are you guys going to be having any more like for 22 or 23? Do you guys have any more coming up the following years?
Well, what you've got to realize is that if you're going to do conferences, you plan a year ahead. And if you think about where
I
we
figured.
were a year from, yeah, COVID was still pretty much meant that you
Right.
couldn't be sure that it was not going to get cancelled. So literally, the earliest it could be a conference would be 2023. Have I made plans for 2023? No. So realistically, it would be 2024 at the earliest if I did one.
Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense because it does take a lot of
Yeah.
planning when you're planning this
It's a
stuff.
year's planning.
I,
It's a year's planning. The biggest thing that you need to do a year in advance is sort your accommodation out for your speakers, and you also have to get the venue a year in advance. So, and there are certain dates in calendars where a lot of these venues are used for other events. So it's not an easy thing. They're the two key things, and you have to have those in place before you can ever try selling a ticket.
Okay. So to close this show out, where can people look up your information? Is there a website for ICER?
Yeah, it's ICER network, ICER.network. So if you just put in ICER, ICER.network, you'll bring up the website, and that has a lot of good stuff on it. We're still building it, but there's a lot of good stuff on there already. There's an ICER Facebook page, so just put in ICER Facebook and it'll come up. I run the ICER Facebook page. My colleague Francisco Correa from Portugal, he does the website, puts things on the website. So between us, we've also got people who are doing shows regularly in South America. We have 6 South American representatives in ICER. So, we're very diverse. We're a mixture of scientists, academics, and leading UFO, UAP researchers. So, there's no other global organization quite like ICER that talk every week in meetings, through general meetings, awareness meetings. And we've actually developed our own evidential history course that we ran for the first time earlier this year. That's free to the point of contact. And that's because we want everybody around the world who has an internet link to learn about the real evidence and not tainted by governments, slant on it. So, we've done an evidential history course that was well reviewed by the people that took part on it, and we'll be running further courses throughout the next 12 months. And we've got other courses, specialist courses coming up. We're developing one on aviation as a specialist course for the aviation industry, but there will be one for religion, there will be one for corporate, because all of these knock-on things need to be addressed. And because if it happened tomorrow that it was admitted, then there's a huge paradigm shift, and some people will not be ready to accept it. They will have psychological problems, a bit like with COVID and lockdowns, people being depressed, isolated, those kind of things. We didn't know because we'd never been in that situation. And then suddenly you're faced with, you can't go out, basically. A lot of people have had a lot of mental health issues from it. I suspect that a proportion of the public would have real difficulties dealing with aliens are real. So we think in ICER that we have to start preparing people and urging countries, corporate, to start dealing with this issue now, because whether they like it or not, it is fast approaching, and better to start thinking about it now.
And with that, I would definitely like to have you guys involved in a database that I'm getting ready to build on for the Thames family, and definitely have you guys involved in that in some way if you'd be willing to.
Well, by all means, submit an idea to us. I don't speak for all of ICER, so we have an executive council. So make a suggestion and put it through to me, and then I'll pass it to the executive council. We'll discuss it and we'll go from there.
That sounds like a good deal to me.
That-
So with
all right,
that,
go
it
ahead.
is. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
No. I was just agreeing with you. I just said that sounds like a
Oh,
really good idea. Definitely good plan.
okay. Yeah, it'll be a little bit before I can, but I definitely will, Gary. Um,
Oh well, just contact me and we'll talk again. But yeah, let's see in a few months' time where we are, and I'm sure other things will be happening by then. So come back to me then. But thank you for inviting me
Absolutely.
as a guest.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. It's been an honor
Thank you.
having you. Um, Everybody in the comment section has thoroughly enjoyed this uh, plethora of information you've given us. Um, it's definitely made
Sorry,
me
we
thinking.
couldn't get to all the questions. No,
Yeah,
I was
we
just
could
saying
not
for
get.
everyone who's watched. Sorry, because we had so many questions. I was trying to get to all. I mean, I wanted to
Yeah,
get to all of them, but I'm sorry we couldn't. But I got to as many as I could.
I'll tell you what, guys.
Well, I
For those of you
think we
whose
did pretty well.
questions did not get answered, save them for the next time we have Gary on the show.
Save them for next time. But thank you very
Yes.
much. I'm going to bed because it's late for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you for staying up with us for so long. And those in the audience, thank you for playing along. And Nick, if it's paranormal or beyond,
You got it covered.
that's right. See you guys all. We will not have a show next week. Nick and I are going to be on the road, so stay tuned in 2 weeks when 13th Dimension comes back. You guys have a good night.
Have a good night.